Aloha class, I wanted to do a video on exercise 6-6, so variable and absorption costing, unit product costs, and income statements. So Lynch Company manufactures and sells a single product. The following costs were incurred during the company's first year of operations. So you can see they've divided by variable and fixed costs per year. So usually we use that with our contribution margin format or variable costing, where we divide the variable versus the fixed. During the year, the company produced 25,000 units and sold 20,000 units. The selling price of the company's product is $50 per unit, right? So when we divide it variable and fixed, that would be our variable costing system. Assume that the company uses absorption costing. So absorption costing would be more product versus period costing, right? So we'd put all the fixed overhead would be with the variable manufacturing overhead and the direct labor and the direct materials, and we would group together the variable selling and admin with the fixed and selling and admin, right? And so we do our cost of goods sold in absorption costing. And so the only difference between those two, if we look at my Excel sheet, right? So absorption costing, we can have direct materials, direct labor, variable overhead, but we also want to include the fixed overhead. And then for variable costing, we do not want to include the fixed manufacturing overhead. So that's the difference there. So our variable costs per unit, if we sum these three up, we can see that it'll be $18 per unit. And then this will have an additional component, right? So we don't want to put 300,000 because it's probably not reasonable that it's going to cost them $318 per unit, right? Because this is in a total amount. So if you're going to get it on a per unit basis, you should do your fixed overhead divided by the number of units. And we want to do the units produced, right? Because this is for production, not what we sold, right? So our work in process, that's what we're producing. And so we should do units produced and not what we're selling, right? And so our two income statements should be exactly the same if they sell everything. If they sell all of their inventory, they should be exactly the same net operating income. But over here, we can see that they produced a specific amount, but they sold a smaller amount. And so that's okay. We don't always sell everything, but our units will be different. And so with this fixed overhead, our ending inventory will be different and our net operating income will be different because of when we expense the fixed overhead. So let's see how our income statements are going to look. Let me delete this. Right, so absorption costing, we have our cost of goods sold. Right, our cost of goods sold is going to be our absorption costing per unit. And remember, we were selling, so now we're going to use the amount of sold, right? Because we're not going to use the amount produced because we didn't sell all of these. We only sold this amount, cost of goods sold. Right, and then we can do our gross margin, this one minus this one, and then our selling fixed expenses, selling fixed expenses, and our selling variable. Remember, so we put all the selling and administrative expenses together. So our variable selling was $4 and we sold 20,000 here. And so our net operating income, this one minus this one minus this one. And so net operating income would be $130,000. Right. And then sales, oh, did I tell you how we get sales? Right, we sold this amount and they told us that it was $50. Just double checking that math there. Variable costing, let's bring this in a little bit more. Okay, variable costing, we have our sales. So they're going to have the same number of sales, $50 times by 20,000 units, same thing, right? Just a different way of presenting things, different timing for expensing. So variable unit costs, variable over here, we need our variable selling. So now this variable selling should now be over here, right? Variable selling will be over here, and we can show that math again. This one times it by the amount we sold, and now we have our contribution margin. Oh, and so there we go. It was probably not $18. It's probably $18 times it by what we sold by units. Make sure it's a total. So you can identify when it's going to be on a per unit or a total basis. Over here, 300,000 didn't seem reasonable over here on a per unit basis, and $18 doesn't seem reasonable when we're comparing $1 million. So good catch for catching yourself. For reasonable, does this number seem reasonable? Does it make sense in this area? So fixed overhead, we can just do that on a total, and then we will have our fixed selling and admin. Okay, And so we're going to have a different amount of net operating income because we are selling an amount that's lower. We're selling an amount that's lower than what we were producing, right? And what if it was we sell an amount that's equal to what we produce? So for an example, what if we did 25,000 units, right? Whatever they produce is what we sold, right? And so when I adjust this number, you can see that our net operating income is exactly the same because we have the same amount of expenses, but the problem doesn't say that you're going to sell exactly the same amount. And so there is going to be a discrepancy with the way that you present it because over here, all of your fixed manufacturing overhead is expensed right away, but over here, your fixed overhead will be included in inventory and then it'll be expensed when it's sold. So that's the difference there. And so, yep, this is your per unit costs that they're looking for using both methods, and then this is your income statement for both methods.